Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Anina Bennett. Welcome to Siren Nation Speaks. This is a monthly series where we're giving creative women a chance to showcase their talents and their interests. And this month we have Liv Vasquez presenting the importance of ethics in plant medicine, which I am really excited to hear about. I will introduce Liv in a moment, but before that, I want to tell you just a little bit about Siren Nation. Siren Nation is a nonprofit based in Portland, Oregon, and our mission is to promote and raise the visibility of women artists, primarily based in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And so that's part of what this monthly series is about. And next month, May, we will be presenting a panel on the state of the arts during COVID time. So you can check our website, sirennation.org, and our Eventbrite page for more information about upcoming events and other things that we're up to. I am going to turn it over to Liv in just a second. We are very excited to have Liv Vasquez with us to talk about ethics in plant medicine and how to identify, brands that are not only ethical, but also well-made. This is a passion for Liv. We were talking about it before we actually started the meeting. Liv is a chef, a recipe creator. She's a plant medicine coach and a consultant. She has worked with global consumer brands as well as individuals, and she recently appeared on Cooked with Cannabis on Netflix. So Liv, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we look forward to you dropping some knowledge on us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro, and thanks for having me. Yes, my name's Liv Vasquez. I am a chef, entrepreneur, restaurateur, and I have been really submerging myself in the plant medicine world for the last 7 years now. I'm lucky to live in Portland, Oregon. Oregon has really progressive drug laws, which help kind of push what we have access to and how we have access to it, which is a big reason I'm here. So a little bit about me. I've been a chef for over 20 years. I started opening restaurants of my own when I was about 23. So I've definitely had a history of working with food, doing restaurant work. But when I moved to Oregon and heard about legalization on the recreational side of cannabis happening, it really spoke to me. I was really excited to get to work in an industry where you could help people. And as the rollout started to happen for recreational legality, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the industry, about how people absorb cannabinoids, how people treat plant medicine. And you really have to look at policy and how policy is made. And I learned all of that pretty early on working in plant medicine. And I'm saying plant medicine generalized because now as everything is progressing, we're getting more access to other types of plant medicine. So I'm going to be talking about other things besides cannabis, but cannabis is really my wheelhouse because it's the industry I've been working in for so long now. And 7 years in other industries might seem like not that long, but cannabis years are like dog years when you're working in this industry because so much changes so quickly. So I started working in the cannabis industry first on the medical side in about 2014. And then that was right when recreational cannabis was slated to start its rollout. So I got to see the transition from medical, how the state and consumers treated medical cannabis moving into recreational cannabis. Even though it's the same plant, it's the same everything. It just was legislated differently, talked about differently, and the way people were imbibing was a little bit different. So I started working in a medical dispensary, and then I just really wanted to learn as much as I could. So I built out a database for this dispensary that tracked hundreds of strains and their lineage, but I also was in a dispensary that was surrounded by hospitals. So I got to work with doctors who specialized in cancer treatment and PTSD mostly. And they would refer patients to me so that I could help them kind of find the right plant medicine for them. because they want to transition out of pharmaceuticals. So that kind of, for 3 years of doing that, acted almost as if it was research for me. It was like I had people who had specific ailments who were coming back to me for years. So I kind of got to treat them as anecdotal research and learn a bit more about how people with medical conditions are treated when they start to use plant medicine, but also what is accessible. Even though it's recreational cannabis, it's still used medically. People still use it medically. So it's important that even if we're calling it recreational, we still have accessibility around it. I, working in this dispensary, worked really hard. I was nominated for one of the best bud tenders in Oregon by Leafly. And Oregon at the time had more dispensaries than McDonald's and Starbucks combined. So out of all of those people working in dispensaries, to be named as one of the top 4 was pretty special. And it, I felt like, was a testament to how much work I had put in to the industry. But soon after that nomination, I started experiencing sexual harassment, discrimination because of my disability, and discrimination because I'm a woman in my workplace, which kind of drove me to the edge. I was really sick because of it, because I have PTSD. I was really triggered. I had a lot of health issues because of it. And I ended up having to leave that job because the way that they were treating me was not ethical. I left. Within 2 days, I got in touch with Time's Up, and Time's Up found an amazing lawyer for me, who helped me sue them and go through multiple court hearings with them. And now there is a lawsuit that I put in place and won that will help other people who need to sue cannabis businesses for discrimination because of sex or disability. In that process, I learned that a lot of people who work in this industry have issues of their own with their health. A lot of the people who own businesses in the industry are disabled and still don't have access to certain things. So it's really important to look at how this entire industry is built by people with disabilities, by people of color, and see how they're treated now that it's starting to make money, right? So it's like we see the money coming in, and then it's like, where are these people coming from and what are their intentions? So that's a little bit of background about me. I've been at this for a few years now, and I think that my lawsuit really showed me the cracks in the foundation. This is a new industry when I'm talking about cannabis and even hemp, CBD. It's a new industry. So we can still say that there's room at the table because the table's still being built. So there's still room for women, there's still room for people of color, and there's still room for people with disabilities to be treated equally and have a fair shot at having their own business, but also just having access to plant medicine that is beneficial to them. Now that we have laws changing around plant medicine, we're starting to see psychedelics become legalized in different forms. We're seeing drugs become decriminalized, which is very exciting. But it's just because it's exciting doesn't mean we still can't be critical of it. We can still be critical and have a critical eye of how these industries are starting to shape. And it's important for us to be loud about who has equal access as all of these new plant medicines are being regulated. I think it's kind of important to look at plant medicine, like, why is ethical plant medicine important? Well, in 2020, going to the doctor became more high risk than ever, right? So more people were leaning into plant medicine because going to the hospital, going to your regular doctor came with a higher risk than it ever had before. So I think a lot of people who now have newer laws that are giving them access to plant medicine, even with CBD being legalized in different places and being legal to access, you have some plant medicines that kind of skirt legality because they're not quite regulated by the FDA or USDA. And then you have some plant medicines that we're now regulating like wildfire, like cannabis. So it's important that we look at the intention of the brand, who's behind the brand, and what is the product like. because there's a saturation of the market. We have, I mean, I joke about this, but you could basically get a CBD corn dog at this point. Like the CBD, everything is out there. So if you're someone who likes CBD or thinks CBD might work for you, it's important that you find a CBD brand that actually works, that is actually putting CBD into their product, because we are seeing this plant medicine renaissance start to happen. And I think a lot of people are leaning more into plant medicine just because they haven't had we haven't had our regular medical access. We haven't been able to just go to the hospital when something happens or go to our doctor when something happens in this last year because the risk is just too high for COVID. So it's important for us to now now that we are taking our health into our own hands, understand the source. With cannabis in particular, cannabis cultivation has been shrouded in mystery for years, and that's because of the prohibition laws surrounding it. Because of that, cultivators and consumers have had to generalize and guesstimate and have hypotheses of where did these things come from, how many milligrams is it, is this going to make me go to sleep, or is this going to be more fun for a daytime project? All of those things were really just a guess. Now we have, I am privileged. I talk about living in cannabis privilege because I live in Oregon. I can go into a dispensary and say, I want this terpene profile. I want it to be 17% THC. I want to have a little bit of CBD in there. I'd like it to be grown by this farm. I can really narrow it down to exactly what I want, but that is privilege. I know there are still people who are just growing whatever seeds they can find and getting stuff from their friend, and they don't get to narrow down, well, what about this works for me? So that's why I started giving kind of generalized education about the plant out on my Instagram page and on my TikTok, because I think it's important for consumers to not just feel like, oh, I'm so lucky that I got plant medicine access, but also I have access to the information around it. I think that people who start to work in the industry who have been in prohibition for so long feel excited to just have access to plant medicine. They feel privileged that they get to work with plant medicine. I feel like my first couple of years working in a dispensary, I would say all the time that, like, I'm so happy I get to help people. I had been a bartender for years, and it kind of feels like you're enabling people. And then to work in cannabis, it felt like I was healing people or helping them heal. And it's a very different turn. So I felt very privileged to get to do this. But when you looked at it on paper, I was not making a livable wage. I was getting harassed every single day by coworkers. I was really having to go through it. And I think that feeling of, oh, I get to have access to this plant medicine kind of overshadowed how much unethical work was being done kind of around me. And going to court and going through the processes that I did really showed me that there are a lot of things that we need to fix and consider when we're giving so much money to these cannabis brands and hemp brands. I mean, they all make money even on the small scale, so we should be really thinking about how we're voting for these brands with our dollars. And I think that's important to look at and not feel like we're just privileged to get to work here. We're privileged to get to work here, yes, but we also need to be taken care of. We have to be paid a livable wage. We have to be, our safety needs to be considered. There are a lot of things that kind of come into play that we get so excited about having access to anything that we forget about all the other things that make this a product that works for us. So I think it's important to look at kind of all of those things. So with legalization happening in cannabis, and even again with hemp, we're seeing a saturation of the market when it comes to brand. So for consumers, this can be really exciting because there's so many new things to try after not being able to try anything for so long, but that can come with its own issues. Oh, I think I froze a little bit there. because all of these things are being newly regulated, I talk a lot about CBD and hemp, but there's a magazine actually that is a great magazine called Terpenes and Testing Magazine, where they're testing products. They're talking about testing across the country and in other countries as well. And we need to kind of have the testing be regulated. It needs to be standardized so that we're all getting similar results that we can compare with each other. But Terpenes and Testing Magazine took the top 10 CBD products sold on Amazon, the most popular products, and tested all 10. Only 2 of them had CBD in them, and only one of them had the amount or close to the amount of CBD that it said it had in it. So, I mean, that's snake oil, right? These people are selling hundreds, thousands of units of product that is unethical because it doesn't work. They're just selling you grapeseed oil and saying it has CBD in it. So it's really important when you're purchasing CBD products to look at the third-party testing. Any CBD brand that's worth its salt will have testing on their website. So that's important also to look into. We do have to do a little bit of background checking with some of these brands, because brands like Select, I talk about kind of regularly, they've become one of the most unethical brands out there for THC and CBD. And then they have expanded to be in so many parts of the country. One of the reasons they're unethical is because the way that the workers are treated, the way that women are treated in their structure, because they make product that has glass in it and sells it to people. They've been sued multiple times about lying about how much percentages of cannabinoids are in their product. So these are all things that, you know, if this was a cereal brand, we probably wouldn't want to eat that cereal anymore, right? So it's important for us to look at these products and not just be like, oh, that's on sale. It's probably on sale because it's not very good. I use this comparison a lot, but if you like go to the grocery store and you're looking at the beer section, who has the best advertising? Budweiser, Bud Light. They probably have the best advertising. Is their beer very good? No, it's mostly water. So they use a lot of their advertising money to get you, you know, a deal on the beer, to give you some cheap beer, to get you excited about their cheap beer, but it's still just cheap, watery beer. And when you look at cannabis brands or plant medicine brands that have huge billboards, who have crazy packaging, who are doing specials all the time, it's really so similar. Their product probably isn't very good, and that's why they're having to sell it at a lower price or with these big specials or have billboards about it, which really isn't going to be doing anybody any good. Really, you know, if we're trying to make a good name for plant medicine, we need plant medicine to actually work. There are so many people who are like, I tried CBD, it didn't work for me. But it's like, did you try CBD from a gas station? Did you try CBD straight from a farm? Did you try it in a tincture? Did you try it in hemp flower? All of these things are different and can give you different effects, but it also depends on the source. Where is it coming from? So we really have to consider sources and the people behind the brand. There's, again, an oversaturation of the market. So it's important for us to support the brands that we want to see thrive and survive. So we have all of these newly regulated pathways to healing and these products, and everything is still kind of being regulated. And when it comes to legislature and even local consumer laws, every state, every county can regulate these things very differently. And when it comes to CBD, that is like the wild, wild west, because there are just so many products coming from so many different places. States like Oregon, Washington, Colorado, we're all still figuring out how to regulate these products, even though we're 5, 6, 7 years deep into our recreational program. So we're trying to regulate them so they're safe and find ways for them to be produced. I use this analogy working in cannabis. It's like working on a train that's already in motion and in full speed. Things are coming up that on that first voyage that you never really considered before. And that includes how employees are treated. That includes having HR departments, things like that, because those are not really available now. And most of these cannabis brands, hemp brands, are small businesses that have less than 10 employees. So they don't have to provide HR department. They don't have to provide days off, like vacation time, stuff like that, that would keep an employee happy. And so the brands that do that are really doing it because they want to just do better and not be a brand that's kind of a throwaway brand. Um, and as we regulate, now in Oregon, we have decriminalized all drugs in small amounts, which could really be helpful for people who are struggling with addiction, people who have issues, because you can either pay a fine or go to a drug treatment program. And I think that that approach could be really helpful for a lot of different people. And it's important to look at kind of all sides of regulation and how these rollouts happen and how they're affecting the community, how they affect the people who are having access to these plant medicines now. So when we look at the ethics of a brand, like what makes a brand ethical, we're going to be looking at their give back. If a brand in cannabis specifically is giving back or being charitable, it's truly out of the goodness of their heart, because they can't write that off on their taxes. So when a brand is charitable, I tend to look at them a little bit more, because they're literally just doing it because they're nice, and because they want to help their community in some way. So I definitely pay attention to that. I also check to see what their employment turnover rate is like, and where they're sourcing their product. Hemp specifically, and cannabis, is a bioaccumulator, which means that it pulls everything out of the soil. There's actually some farmland in Italy, I believe it was Italy, that had some metal leaking into the soil. And it was so bad, from like this old factory that was like leaching metals into the soil. It was so bad that the country had to say, you have to kill all the livestock, kill all of the crops you have, and stop producing food on this land because it's too toxic. So a few years passed, and then the farmers started to use hemp, not to sell hemp or cultivate hemp, but to use the hemp to pull all the toxins out of the soil, because it's great at doing that. Because it's great at doing that, though, means that it's pulling toxins out of the soil and producing them into flour. So if you have a farm that's not really checking for, doing tests for metals, doing tests for the soil, and testing the flour itself once it's been harvested, you really could get pretty sick if they're not testing for all of these things. So things that you would want to look for are Clean Green certified, Sun Earth certified. Those are great programs that really look at the cleanliness and quality of flour. But if you hear a farm, dispensary, or brand say this THC flour is organic, then they inherently are lying to you because the FDA and the USDA do not regulate cannabis, so they cannot call it organic legally. And if someone says this is organic, I'll just be like, good for you. Where is your Sun Earth certification? Where is your green certified, clean green certified certification? Because those are the ones that actually have any weight to them. They're the only ones that actually mean something, because calling flour organic is literally just calling it something. It doesn't really have any weight to it or mean anything. So brands that are more transparent about that are usually the brands that I tend to lean into a little bit more. Brands where the farmer actually is producing something that they care about because they know they're making medicine for people. And that's really important to me. I use this term kind of regularly. I say healers, not dealers, because in this industry that's oversaturated, where there are a lot of people who are trying to make a quick buck, it is kind of like the gold rush. We are seeing people now in hemp cannabis and now psychedelics who are trying to run to make the first buck or make the most money in this space. And then there are people who just have a great product who use cannabis or hemp or psychedelics to on their own healing journey. They really just want to share the great healing aspects with other people, and those are the healers, not the dealers to me. So I think that kind of looking at brands with that kind of are you this, are you that, can be very limiting to some, but it also can kind of cut out the BS in this oversaturated market. So it's important for us to look at who we're buying from. I think on even the illegal market, it was the whole thing was know your dealer. Well, even in the legal market, we need to know who we're getting things from. So when I recommend products, I literally check from the farm, the processing, the labs they use, and then who's selling it, who's processing it into a tincture, and then what dispensary are they in or what sales platform are they on. Oregon specifically had an issue a few years ago with a lab that was testing for THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids that was run by literal Nazis. So we had people who were not only benefiting from the cannabis industry, but were making money and putting it back into this like regime of whatever that they were doing. The industry as a whole pretty much called them out after more people found out about it and they ended up closing the lab. But we couldn't have had that happen unless we were all loud about the way that they talked about things, loud about how these people were profiting in a space that they shouldn't be profiting in. We really kind of had to run them out of town. And we couldn't have done that without our collective community standing up and saying, we're not using this lab anymore. If you use this lab, you're kind of taking a side. And we really just shut it down. It takes doing that kind of across the board, from consumers to people who own dispensaries, to say, I'm not going to work with this brand because I don't find them to be ethical, does help kind of eliminate the bad players from this, again, oversaturated market. And it's still new. So we have to be critically thinking about the people who are giving us our medicine or making our medicine. We really have to look into it and see who's profiting. And I know it can seem overwhelming when you're someone who's new to it and you really just want to find some CBD drops that work for you. But most brands that are worth anything are very transparent. And I think especially in plant medicine, you will find brands that are very transparent about how they treat employees, how they treat their product, and the other brands that they work with, which is kind of the beauty of the industry of cannabis and hemp, is everyone is really proud of who they work with because they know that it takes a lot of time and energy and sometimes extra money to just work with brands that you know are aligned with your values, who are making a great product, and we're all getting to the finish line feeling good about the product that we're putting forward. So do a little extra research. I mean, I think that it's important to remember also, these are all small businesses. Even the bigger dispensaries and things like that are still kind of a small business. We don't really have chains, so it is almost easy to write these brands an email and just say, hey, your product helped me, with my back pain. I appreciate it. I just would like to know more about how employees are treated, or where you source your hemp. Do you, do X, Y, and Z at the farm? A lot of these farmers are stuck dealing with regulation changes, and producers, people who make products, are dealing with regulation changes, law changes, having product be stalled because we're having issues with shipping, things like that. So when they get the emails of your product is actually helping me, or I would love to know more about you, a lot of them are excited to get those emails because they're like, I can't write this off on my taxes. I can't really make a commercial about it. How do I tell people, how much work I'm putting in to their medicine to know that it's a good product and that I believe in it and I use it every day? Those kinds of stories that you hear from farmers, from producers, those are important, because we had such an excess of cannabis here in Oregon in the first few years of regulation for legalization of recreational cannabis, we actually had an issue with suicide rates of the hemp and cannabis farmers in Southern Oregon spiking. Because imagine if you were in Florida, you're an orange farmer, and now you can't sell oranges outside of your state. So there's an oversaturation of oranges. Orange juice is 9 cents a gallon. You're making no money, and you've put all of your livelihood, work, everything into this orange farm. Like, it can be definitely very depressing. And I think that a lot of these farmers need to know that their work is not for nothing, that they're actually helping people on their healing journey, and that we appreciate what they're doing. And they are very receptive to that. So I encourage people to make relationships with your producers, with your farms, with products you like. I used to be the kind of person that if I read a book and I liked it, I would write the author and tell them, like, your book was amazing. I appreciate it so much. And I think that that carried over into when I started working in cannabis, and I was able to just kind of write to producers, to products, and just say, hey, I love this brand. I use your product every day for my back pain or for other issues. And it's been so helpful. And I appreciate you, because that can really bring like some like motivation to keep going to some of these producers, because they're really putting it all out there. If they're making a good product, they're probably putting a lot into it. But then there are products like Apothecana, the topical, that people tend to buy a lot, and it has a low price point, so there's a low barrier for entry, but it doesn't have barely any product in it. So they're kind of selling you a snake oil in that way too, where it's like they sell a ton of the product, but it's basically lotion. It has maybe 4 milligrams of THC in it, and it doesn't really work like that. It's more the arnica and the lotion that you're really feeling. So a product like that is going to sell a lot. People are going to buy it because it's a lower price point. But what are you actually buying? It's expensive for lotion, but not expensive for a THC infused topical. So just use a little bit of critical thinking. And I know that it's exciting to be in a place where we are getting more and more access to plants, because I was excited about it. And I know other people are excited about it. But there's also things that we have to consider so that we have a healthy and good relationship with our plant medicine. I think that it's important also to note that now that more legality is happening, more people have been coming forward with issues related to cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome. Cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome, from what researchers are trying to figure out, is basically an overloading of your endocannabinoid system with cannabinoids. And you kind of max out. It's like getting alcohol poisoning and not being able to drink again. It's kind of similar to that, but we need more research. We need more information. Doctors are just now starting to research it. And because we have more legalization, more people have been coming forward saying, oh, I have this, or I've gotten this, because they were excited about edibles coming to market or THC products, and they might have just gotten a little too excited and over imbibed. But some researchers think it might be related to neem oil or pesticides on cannabis or hemp that could be getting people sick as well. We don't have definitive answers. We still need more research around it, but it's important to kind of look at those things and think, like, if it is pesticides or issues with the plants being sprayed and making people sick, then we need another regulation of cleanliness so that we don't have those issues anymore, and make it no pesticides, and find new regenerative ways to produce plant medicine. But all of this is accessible. I think it's more accessible information than people really realize, because we've lived in this prohibition time for so long where we didn't have access to the information, or it was almost, it felt almost illegal to learn these things sometimes. So I think that now people really need to realize that you can use your voice. And I hope that more people feel empowered to use their voice to ask questions about the products that they're consuming. I mean, even with CBD, a CBD tincture can be $70, $80. If you're giving someone $80 a month, you probably want to know that they're making a good product, the product works, and that they're not bad people. Kind of at the baseline, we would like to think that those are the things we want to cover with someone that we're giving our money to. But we also, have more freedom, and we have more power than I think we give ourselves credit for. So hopefully, more of us can feel comfortable and empowered to ask about where our plant medicine comes from and who's really profiting from it. Because there are really unethical CBD brands out there. When you think of CBD, you just think like, oh, this is like a nice way for me to, deal with headaches or stress or anxiety. But with brands like Select and Ignite, there are women who are getting trafficked using these brands. There are people who are getting hurt because the brands themselves are selling product that is shoddy, that has, I mean, again, Select was selling tincture that had glass in it to people. So things like that, where people are like, just sell it anyways, we'll deal with the lawsuit later. I don't want a product that is being sold like that. I don't want to support a brand that thinks it's not a big deal that someone could be swallowing glass with their product. So the whole point is to give a good reputation to plant medicine, a good reputation to healing, and to really look at who we are giving our money to, because our money matters, and we can vote with our dollars, especially when we have so many options out there. And all of this, of course, more speaks to the legalized market, but it is just important to note and think about as these laws are changing, because they're changing quickly, and the things we have access to are changing pretty quickly. So just use a critical eye and give feedback. I think that that's an important element, because some of these brands, it's their first product they're making, or their first time making a product outside of their kitchen. So they're upscaling. And as a chef, even just from the food point of view, if I was making a bunch of edibles at home that were great, and then I upscaled to make edibles for dispensaries and something was off, the flavor wasn't as good or something like that, I would hope someone would tell me so I could take a look at it, because we can only, as a producer, only look so much into it. And I think you need that second opinion of the consumers to say, oh, I like this. And in dispensaries, I think consumers also need to use their voice in these new dispensaries to say, I like this brand, or I don't like this brand, or do you know about this brand? Have you heard about what they're doing with X, Y, and Z? And we want to have safe places for people to work, safe products for consumers to consume, and really give a good reputation to plant medicine, because I do feel like it's going to be carrying us over for a couple of years now that we've seen. I think we've all experienced a little bit of fear around going to the doctor in the last year. So I think that it's important for people to have more confidence that they can turn to plant medicine and have a product that actually helps. So I think that's about my time, but I would love to answer some questions and kind of hear a little bit of feedback from the audience now.
Hey, thank you so much, Liv. I have a couple of questions, and I want to encourage the audience, if you have any questions or comments, to go ahead and put them in the chat. And if you want to be on video, I can spotlight you on video, but we're happy to take questions through the chat as well. Well, we have one right away, and I have one that's sort of related to that. Are there any CBD brands that you particularly recommend?
Well, I say look at the farm. There are some great farms that I love and that I work with. I mentioned earlier that farms are not regulated by the FDA and USDA, but some products that are really good have started to be regulated by the USDA. I think there's only 4 of them now out of all of the thousands we have out there. But 2 of the farms that I always trust the products that they make are Hudson Hemp on the East Coast. Hudson Hemp is in Hudson, New York. They're woman owned. They do great like structural payment for employees, and the product is beautiful. Like they have amazing terpene profiles. The flower itself is really nice, and every product that I've had from that base farm has been really innovative, tasty, good. So I know that they're working with brands that they believe in and that are similarly valued. And then here in Oregon, one of my favorite farms where I actually hosted CBD summer camp is East Fork Cultivars in Southern Oregon. Their logo has a little llama on it. You will see them in new seasons and the grocery store. Just look for like a little llama on the label. I love East Fork because not only their location makes amazing flower, they have come up with some amazing regenerative ways to not use pesticides. They have this thing that they do with potatoes to keep pests out that's incredible. And the CEOs make the same as the lowest paid people on the farm. So they're really like making sure that everything is structurally where we would want it. And they go into some of my favorite products like Empower CBD. They make soaking salts, topicals. I think they have a tincture as well. And they have products for sexual wellness. They're woman owned as well. I love their products. I work with Greater Goods. I'm actually making a CBD chocolate bar, CBD and terpene chocolate bar with Greater Goods right now. They use East Fork cultivars as their hemp base as well. So I say look at the farm first, and usually there are some amazing products that come straight from that farm that get turned into awesome products. But I love Greater Goods. I love East Fork. East Fork makes their own drops, and they're actually opening a bar, a hemp bar here in Portland in the next few months. They've been working on it for a while. And their drops are amazing. They're water soluble and they're delicious. So I would say East Fork, Greater Goods. I love Canapa also. That's a woman-run company, and they use East Fork as their hemp. And Hudson Hemp, kind of like all of the stuff they work with. If you're on the East Coast and you need a good local hemp source, Hudson Hemp would be the one I would look at.
And definitely avoid the gas station CBD. You cracked me up with that one. Yeah, definitely don't buy it at a gas station. Although in Portland, I don't know, in Portland, there might be some gas stations that have decent CBD.
I mean, maybe I see some of my friends' brands in new seasons and stuff like that. So it's like, I think Portland is a craft market, regardless of the store. We're kind of more craft. So maybe you would find a gas station here.
I'm sure there are so many aspects that depend on where you are. We do have someone else who wants to ask a question on video, but my question is sort of related to this. So I'm going to ask first. Those were, first of all, great recommendations. And I love that you're so well informed about all the manufacturers and the farms and the processes. I didn't know a lot of what you were telling us about Select, for example. That's really good information to have. So we put the links for Sun and Earth and Clean Green Certified in the chat for people. Are there any other, and obviously you're a great source of information, are there any other organizations or information sources that you can recommend to people to educate themselves in general about plant medicine, and also specifically about, like finding out about how ethical the company's practices are?
Well, because it's still being regulated, unfortunately, we're still kind of find the regulators to actually go through and make sure that everything is above board. So that's why I say on a personal level, also everybody's values are different. Like, what do you value? What's important to you? That you'll probably find a farm that's making a product that is all the same things you want. So I just want to empower people to take a look for themselves at the farms, at the products they use. If you use something and like it, write them an email, ask them, why do I like this? It's so great. And they'll probably tell you, we spent extra money on heavy metal testing. We spent extra money on A, B, and C, because a lot of these things aren't regulated by the state or even by our own industry. like I said, it's like fixing a train that's already in motion. Sometimes we'll have these like certifications pop up later, but Sun and Earth certified and Clean Green certified are ones that have been around for a long time. They've been regulating farms all over the place. And Sun Earth certified is who Dr. Bronner's uses. Dr. Bronner's is actually an amazing source, to be honest. They're a hemp soap, and they give a lot back to the industry as far as not just money, but giving advocacy to different parts of growing plant medicine. And they actually put a bunch of money into the legalization of psychedelic assisted therapy and psilocybin assisted therapy. So they're really a great source for making sure that everything is clean, because they do have the other side of their brand that is regulated by the FDA and USDA. So they have to make sure that it's clean. So I think they're a great source to kind of look at who they're working with and who they tout. And they actually work with East Fork cultivars. They work with some of my favorite farms as well. So
it sounds like depending on what kind of product you're talking about, to sort of you can sort of try and follow the supply chain, trace the supply chain backwards, see what it's made from, who's making it. If it's not a flower product, where does the flower actually come from? Who's growing it?
yes,
Where are the plants grown? What are the practices there, right?
yes, exactly.
Awesome. We have a question from Ankara Wellness Church, and I'm going to see if I can spotlight them on video.
Hi, I'm not sure how it's working, but I just have like a question. Not
Yeah.
sure if so I'm a plant medicine facilitator here in Oakland, and a part of like I guess my question goes into like a grievance, because I haven't really seen much transparency from any like collectives or communities or agencies or whatnot. So I was wondering if you have any recommendations of sources that I can look into, that are community oriented, that are equitable and do support diversity and centering BIPOC voices and those from disenfranchised communities. I was wondering if you have any recommendations for any smaller collectives that I can follow.
So California is kind of its own beast. It is kind of the wild, wild west in California. You do have a lot of people who are trying to rush to market with their product. Personally, if you're in Oakland, I would look towards any dispensaries that are on reservations, or look towards the native communities that are doing, because they even have their own jurisdictions as well around plant medicine. A lot of them grow it themselves, but I think that they are a great resource, and they probably have listings of other resources. I know some amazing collectives in the Pacific Northwest that really center those voices, like Women Weed Wi-Fi, one of my favorites. They're amazing. But I think that it does take a little bit of finding your community and who has those similar ideals, because I've learned in the past few years that not everybody who uses cannabis thinks the way I do. So I think it's important for us to kind of find, who's akin to us, who has those same values. And I mean, personally, I will go in dispensaries and be like, gross, you carry Select? Like, I will straight up call them out and then see how they react. If they're just like, what? I didn't know. Then I'm like, okay, I'll give you a little, leeway, because they do pay a lot of money to bury stories and stuff like that. But you can only give so much. We do have to hold these brands accountable. And they, like I said, they're still new businesses, even though they've been around, I think 5 years now in California, and then longer than that on the medical side. But the medical side is people who are disabled, who are working. So I think that if you look into like the medical cannabis community and who has been there really supporting, donating, giving back, creating opportunities from even that point in time, I think they probably are hopefully still standing and fighting for those same things with a little bit stronger of a voice or more people. And if you find someone who you vibe with as a brand, just reach out to them. I mean, there are these smaller collectives of people who are really fighting for those spaces. Can-Occlusive is also amazing. I love them. They are really fighting in different states too, to make sure that there's equity. But it is like, again, we do have to really use our voice to find who we align with, really.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate your energy.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And that's, do you actually Liv, can you talk a little bit about, since we do have some other people on from Portland, and I know this is a big issue in every community, where would people look in Portland for that kind of community and that kind of organization that's centering those voices?
Well, we have toketivity, which is great because there is some diversity there when it comes to not only just like women, but queer voices, but people of color. I feel like they do give a great spotlight to people with different backgrounds, with different voices, different opinions. And I think that they have really given a great online space for a lot of that as well. And Women Weed Wi-Fi is kind of like a wellness collective of Black POC women who are just ethereal. I feel like they're just beautiful and amazing, and they're really promoting plant medicine. But I think that it is really like we do have an oversaturation in Oregon specifically, I feel, because we have so many dispensaries, so many brands. And again, I think that it's going to take finding your community, the people who you agree with. We have Make and Mary, which is great. And now she has a storefront. Make and Mary is always, she's a woman of color who owns the business, but she always tries to give different spaces to different people. But with COVID, we're in this weird separate online, not really getting to commune the way that we used to. And post quarantine, I'm not even sure what that's going to look like. We've seen brands who have completely fallen off and folded because of COVID. And we've seen brands that have just been keeping up and even getting more steam because they just kept going and their brand took off. So I think that in this weird time where everybody's scattered and kind of finding their footing, it can be a little tricky, but there are some amazing spaces online that will be there for a little while where we can figure out who we like and why we like them. But again, I think that it's looking into, the brands we like and who runs them. It's like who's profiting off of it.
I put the links for, I think it's the right one for Women Weed Wi-Fi and for Toketivity in the chat. And I know that Toketivity is actually a global organization, and they have chapters in different places, and they do online meetings and socials as well. So if you're in a place where you're looking to connect and looking to share information with people outside your community, they're probably a great organization for that. Well, we're just about out of time. I do have one other thing I just wanted to ask you. This might be like too much to talk about in a few minutes, but I feel like a lot of what you're talking about is stuff we've been through with food already, right? So this feels like the early days of when people were starting to repay attention to how their food is grown, raised, processed, made, what the ingredients are that are being used on it while it's being grown. And I know that you're also really interested in food as a delivery method and in the art of food. Can you just tell us real quick, like tell us a little bit about the relationship between food and plant medicine and education for you, because I think it's so interesting that you use those two things together for education.
Well, it's absorption and digestion, really. Like we absorb and digest cannabinoids, we absorb and digest the other parts of the plant. When it comes to cannabis, there's some amazing elements like chlorophyll and vitamin A and vitamin D. These are all things that we would want from our food. And my events, because of the weird legalities and things, they've been in kind of interesting places. I call it bringing table to farm because I do these pop-ups sometimes on the farm. The one I did on the East Fork cultivars farm, I brought a forager. So he was foraging food for us that I was then making into our brunches and dinners and stuff while we were at camp. And then we also had the cannabis that was grown right there. So you have the food, the cannabis, and all of you can taste the water, you can taste the elements from where you're sitting in the food because it all came from the same place. I actually did a pop-up in Napa where I compared cannabis and wine that grew next to each other. And I called it varietals because you can really taste the different elements. We call it that the terroir when you're talking about wine. And that's like the seasons, the weather patterns, the soil, and how it makes a great product. Terroir is really important when we're looking at cannabis as well. And when we're looking at food, like where does the food grow? So when I really started to work with patients, I was working on the medical side. And one of my favorite clients was actually came in as recreational. She was 95 and she said, I want an edible, but if I eat it today, I'm not going to get high till 5 p.m. tomorrow. And she's like, and I just want to be high. I'm not using it for anything. She was very like, I just like having fun. But when she said that to me, it was like a light bulb went off. It was just like, oh yeah, older people have a different digestion rate. They're going to be digesting things differently. People who have IBS are not going to really digest a sugary brownie well enough to get all the cannabinoids out of it. So if you're eating something that your body naturally doesn't digest well, you're not going to get the full amount of cannabinoids out of that. And honestly, bottom line, that's not cost efficient. When I look at it, I'm like, you're going to be wasting your money on weed when you can be absorbing every cannabinoid if you're eating something that is easily digestible to you. So that's why plant-based medicine makes a better carrier for cannabinoids because it's easier to digest. You digest it a little bit quicker than meat. And you can you're not having to cook it a really long time. We're cooking off cannabinoids. Like if you're cooking a roast or a steak, you're cooking it for a long time. And the longer it sits in the oven, the more cannabinoids are basically evaporating from it. So all of that kind of came into focus when I started working more with people with different digestions, and working with food for so long, it kind of just made sense to me at that point that the food carrier really does facilitate the cannabinoids, like they all work together. So I wrote my ebook about the bad brownie experience because everyone's had it. Because when you look at a pan of brownies, the outside cooks everything out and it's like crunchy. The inside is just the gooey middle. So you're basically playing Russian roulette with that pan of brownies. The outsides are going to have almost nothing, and then the middle is going to be a rocket to outer space. So you have to kind of look at the heat, the digestion, and how you're infusing it. But a good edible is like worth taking note and making sure that it works with your digestion and your diet and the way you eat. It's going to be a better edible for you if you're just eating the way you eat.
Unmute. Thank you for that and for all of the amazing information, and also for sharing some of your personal experiences in the industry. I'm sorry that you went through that, but I think you're amazing for trying to make it a better place for everyone who works in it and for people who enjoy the products, and also make the planet a little better, hopefully, as well.
That's the plan, I hope.
Well, we have a couple of people just saying thank you very much, things they've never thought about in this topic. And for everyone's information, we did record this, and we're not going to post it right away, but it will eventually be posted on our YouTube channel. And you can find Siren Nation at sirennation.org. And I put Liv's website in the chat. Liv, any parting thoughts before we officially sign off?
If you are in Portland, at my first event in over a year, I'm doing a COVID-safe dining event at the Jupiter Hotel. I love the Jupiter, designed by women. They've been supportive of the community throughout the last year, and I really wanted to work with them and give back. So we're doing in-room dining. It's a private dining experience. They have ADA rooms for people who are disabled, and then they also have everything will be in writing if you're hard of hearing or deaf. So it's going to be completely accessible, and I'm excited for it. The menu is going to be awesome. So if you're in Portland or if you want to do a staycation at the Jupiter Hotel, I would love to see some of y'all there.
Oh, what's the date again on that?
It's going to be April 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And every room is private. You get a private dinner, and then they're doing discounted rates for the rooms if you want to make like a staycation vacation out of it.
And it is a cool venue. If you live in Portland and you've never seen the Jupiter Hotel or the Doug Fir, it's definitely worth a look.
It's beautiful.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again, Liv, so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. Thanks to everyone who signed on for your input and your questions. It was great to see people here from different places. And, hope to see you again here next month.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.